Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Frenzel with the California Department of Education. And today we're here to present a webinar on national updates. And we have two very special guests here with us today. First, I'm going to introduce Ms. Meredith Hills. She is Advance CTE's Senior Associate for Federal Policy. And she's here to present with us some updates on the national level. So thank you for being here, Meredith.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you for inviting me to speak to all of your colleagues today. I'm really happy to be here virtually, although I wish I was physically in California. I'm glad to be with you all over Zoom. Like Allison said, my name is Meredith Hills. I'm here from Advance CTE, and I cover our federal policy advocacy. So a little bit about Advance CTE for those who are unfamiliar. We're a nonprofit established in 1920. Yes, that means we are in our 100th year of existence right now, and we represent state and territory heads of secondary, post-secondary, and adult CTE across the country. Through leadership, advocacy, and partnerships, we support innovative and high-quality CTE system. And I just want to give a special shout out and thanks to Pradeep Raju, the Director of College and Career and College Transitions in California. He's been a longtime member of Advance CTE, served on our board, and just has been an enormous resource to us as an organization. Today, I'm going to go through Advance CTE and the Association for Career Technical Education, or ACTE's COVID-19 response and recovery priorities as it pertains to federal advocacy. I'm going to talk a little bit about where are we now with our federal stimulus bills. I'm going to go through the long list of introduced bills that never went anywhere, talk a little bit about what to expect next, and then share some advocacy tools that you all can use and share out as well. So starting off with our advocacy priorities, I just want to give a little bit of background. These were created in partnership with ACTE and developed based on conversations with both our and their membership. So these are really reflective of what we've been hearing from all of you that you need from a stimulus bill, that you need from the Department of Education, and really anything else across that spectrum. This is a dynamic document, so as you're going through this pandemic and realizing new or persisting needs, please do feel free to contact me. My email will be on the last slide, and share whatever is on your mind. I also want to say that you may find some of these topics, especially when I get to the flexibilities and statutory waivers, you might be thinking, well, it's a little bit too late at this point in the academic year or the fiscal year. We're continuing to raise these issues because, unfortunately, it looks like the flexibilities and resources that were needed this year are going to be continued to be needed in the next academic year at least. So we're continuing to bring awareness to these priorities. So in the next Congress, members will already kind of have this on their radar. So just wanted to say that before I get started. So first I'll go through the new investments that we see a need for. These are not the only investments we're asking for. These are the new investments that don't exist in any form, and we're trying to get created. So first and foremost, we're advocating for at least $1 billion in additional directed resources to CTE programs. The most recent stimulus bill, the CARES Act, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with at this point, did have Perkins as an authorized use of funds, but there was no CTE-specific funding, so we're asking for that. We're also calling to reinstate the partnership grants for community and technical colleges. This is basically reinstating the Trade Adjustment and Assistance Community College and Career Training, or TACT, grant program. Now I'll go over some of the statutory flexibility and waivers, and these were all asked for based on what our membership and ACTE's membership was relaying back to us. So this includes establishing a redistribution waiver for local recipients, extending the definition of professional development. A little background on that, the CARES Act waived the ESSA definition for professional development, which required to be sustained, intensive, and have a classroom focus. Obviously, not all of that is sustainable right now with COVID-19. So the CARES Act waived that for ESSA. The Perkins definition is aligned to ESSA, but it doesn't take directly from ESSA statute. So we're asking for that same flexibility for CTE. We're also advocating to rescind the supplement, not supplant provisions and expand pooling flexibility for funds. I also want to note that all of these flexibilities and waivers do have time constraints. We're not asking for permanent statutory changes, but rather these flexibilities and waivers that need to happen during the pandemic. There are also some bigger policy priorities we've been talking about that fit into COVID response and recovery. Some of these include the need to expand Pell Grants to high-quality short-term programs, reinstating and expanding Pell eligibility in prisons, increasing support for non-traditional post-secondary students, and directing investments to research and development. So where are we now? As you all know, the last stimulus bill with education funding was passed in March. This was the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act, or the CARES Act. Now we're obviously in the implementation phase of this bill. Advance CTE and ACTE are following how this funding is being used across states. And I'm just going to put this out there. If you want to share how your team is using CARES funding, please send me an email. And you can check back at our website. We'll be sharing out kind of an analysis of how states are using CARES funding. Since March, although the CARES Act is the only comprehensive stimulus bill that's been passed in that time, many bills have been introduced. I'll give an overview of those in a couple of minutes. Most recently, within the last couple of weeks, a revised version of the House Democrat Health and Economic Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions Act, or the HEROES Act, was introduced. This can be referred to as HEROES 2.0. This was a $2.2 trillion comprehensive package that includes $208.1 billion for an education stabilization fund. Of that, there's $175 billion for elementary and secondary education, $27 billion for public post-secondary education, $11.9 billion for private institutions, and $4 billion for governors to use on education. And this can include restoring state and local education support. There is no CTE specific funding, but the bill does include flexibility for pooling of funds to support the transition from secondary to post-secondary or employment, as well as flexibility for the definition of professional development. This bill passed the House about 2 weeks ago, but it's not expected to move any further. The HEROES 2.0 Act follows the same theme that stimulus proposals have really all followed since the CARES Act was passed. They were introduced by one party with largely a messaging goal, knowing that all sides really were unlikely to come to an agreement. This has been the case in the House, in the Senate, with Republicans, with Democrats, really all across the board. For the most part, none of these bills have included CTE-specific funding. However, they have included variations of some of the flexibilities I mentioned earlier. So now I'm going to go through some of the CTE-related stimulus proposals that have been introduced between the CARES Act and HEROES 2.0, just to give you an idea of what's being put out there. And again, this common theme of introduced in one chamber by one party. So as I mentioned, and as I know you all probably talk about every day, the last major stimulus package was the CARES Act. This was the third and the most comprehensive package that was passed since the COVID pandemic came to light. The CARES Act in total was a $2.2 trillion bill for really comprehensive economic relief, and it included $30.75 billion for an education stabilization fund. This number is made up of $2.9 billion for the governor's emergency education relief fund, $13.5 billion for the elementary and secondary emergency relief fund, and $14 billion for the higher education emergency relief fund. And now, of course, this is in the implementation phase. Next, we saw introduction of the Relaunching America's Workforce Act. This was introduced in May in the House and the Senate. And this was a small bill that focused solely on education and workforce development. The idea was that this bill would be included in a larger comprehensive package. This includes $1 billion for CTE, as well as flexibility during the pandemic for retention of funds that weren't used during the 2019 to 2020 school year, flexibility for local Perkins recipients to pool funds for secondary to post-secondary or employment, and it waives some of those professional development requirements during the pandemic that I mentioned earlier. It also includes $2 billion for community and industry partnership grants, which is essentially reinstating the tax grants. So, of course, you might be thinking, well, some of these flexibilities were for the 2019 to 2020 academic year, and that's great, but we're past that. And I think the hope is that this bill was introduced, it sent a message, and those flexibilities that continue to be needed can be updated with the academic year and put into future bills. Also in May, House Democrats introduced their HEROES 1.0 Act. The main difference for the purpose of education funding between the two is the HEROES 2.0 just cut down on the overall funding in that bill. And the purpose of that was to try to find a middle ground between all folks involved. Another introduced legislation was the Coronavirus Child Care and Education Relief Act. This was introduced by Senate Democrats in July and would provide $430 billion to child care and education activities. Again, this was a more niche bill, and the hope was that it would be included in a comprehensive bill. This did allocate $1 billion for CTE programs and activities to support state and local CTE needs as a result of the pandemic. That could also include updates to physical or digital infrastructure or expansion of work-based learning supports. The bill includes $345 billion for an education stabilization fund, and it also would provide $4 billion for the FCC E-rate program to increase internet access for students and educators. And of course, that bill did not go anywhere either, but hopefully the message is out there and it will be picked up at a later point. Next, in August, Senate Republicans introduced the Health Economic Assistance Liability in Schools Act, or the HEALS Act, and this was a $1 trillion proposal for a comprehensive relief package. It included $105 billion for an education stabilization fund, with $70 billion for elementary and secondary education. Of that $70 billion, 2/3 were required to go to local education agencies that met requirements around opening in person. It also included $29 billion for higher education and $5 billion for the governor's emergency relief fund. Unfortunately, there is no CTE specific funding in this bill, although it does include some of the flexibilities for Perkins retention of funds, pooling of funds, and professional development. And then lastly, taking us to present day, earlier this month, House Democrats introduced HEROES 2.0. So what can we expect next? After the November election, there will be an agenda for the first 100 days. This will come regardless of whether we have a new administration or continue with the existing one. And it's likely that a stimulus package will take place in that time. With a new Congress coming in as well, this 100-day agenda will take place at that level too. Until then, we really just need to sit tight and we can expect little to no legislative movement. There is widespread recognition and agreement that some kind of COVID response and recovery legislation needs to be passed, but the disagreement comes regarding the scope and most of the details that go into that. After the presidential and congressional elections, this work will be picked back up again. So going into what the first 100 days of an administration will look like, we have been pleased to see that this election has included CTE in presidential campaign platforms. In the winter, there was a large pool of candidates. You all remember that. And we published a blog series that shared out how CTE specifically was included in each proposal. We were happy to see that of that enormous pool, pretty much every campaign called out CTE specifically by name or talked about priorities that directly related and built into CTE. So this is really exciting and a really good sign of seeing how after November, CTE will be part of the national discussion. I'll just briefly talk about some of the highlights in both candidates' platforms relating to CTE. Former Vice President Joe Biden published the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force recommendations, and that included a section on providing a world-class education in every zip code. There are many intersections with CTE in those policy proposals. For one, Biden called out the need to expand access to CTE programs and specifically points out the need to increase CTE funding, which we are thrilled to see. It also states that the country's education system should prepare learners for college, careers, and to be informed, engaged citizens of our communities, our country, and our planet. CTE and apprenticeships in particular is pointed out as a strategy to offer opportunities for lifelong learning. Biden's full campaign platform calls out the need for guaranteeing every American the skills and education they need to get ahead as a pillar of his vision for the country. Specifically, there are two avenues that he focuses on to build CTE opportunities. One is to ensure middle and high school students are prepared for good jobs, and the second is to create more opportunities for high school students to take practical classes that lead to credentials. As we've all seen, the Trump administration is also generally supportive of CTE. Although as an incumbent, we haven't seen a more formal campaign platform, especially relating to career technical education. There are recent actions that have shown that the administration continues to prioritize CTE. A few examples are the administration published the Pledge to America's Workers, a call to action by the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board. This was released in May and talked about COVID-19's impact on the economy and put out a call to action for recovery. One of those three goals was to expedite American workers' return to employment and upward mobility by investing in career pathways and implementing skills-based hiring practices. So that attention to career pathways as a whole and skills-based hiring supports a lot of the missions that we all do in CTE. Over the summer, Trump signed an executive order on modernizing and reforming the assessment and hiring federal job candidates and mandated that the federal hiring process will take a skills-based approach instead of relying on degree attainment. And also, over the summer, the administration released its Find Something New campaign. This is an effort to encourage people who are unemployed or unsatisfied in their current occupation to find a pathway to a new job or career. And this is a product of the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board. The ad campaign seeks to meet the need for skills-based training as an alternative to traditional four-year degree program in order for employees to find jobs. So as all of us on this webinar, I'm sure I know, and I'm preaching to the choir, we all know this, that despite the lack of attention to CTE or workforce development in all of the stimulus bills that have been passed or proposed, CTE is going to have a vital role in economic recovery. An astronomical number of Americans have filed for unemployment, and this number is only expected to rise. This means that folks of all ages will need fast but high quality upskilling and reskilling programs that will bring them to a living wage and an in-demand career. During the last recession, college enrollment increased by nearly 2.5 million students, largely due to non-traditional age college students. A similar trend, but more so, can be expected. Yet many policymakers are not supporting CTE programs and immediate response efforts. Now I'm going to go through some of the advocacy tools that our amazing communications team created. So I'm going to start by going through some of the whys, the big facts that we're communicating out. And these are written in a way that can be communicated with policymakers, with the media, with employers, really any key stakeholders. These resources can really equip you, your staff, the rest of your team to be spokespeople, all using the same message. And I have the actual URLs linked throughout the slides so you can easily access all of this information. But our comms team really did a wonderful job of creating resources that are really easy to repeat, really easy to repurpose, so you can put in your state and local data and really engaging. So for the why, these are big facts that we're communicating out. Of course, there are in-depth resources and looks about each of the why, but for the purpose of these assets and advocating to policymakers, we're using graphics and taking some of the most jarring statistics. So some of the ones that we're sharing out are how we're seeing so many communities disproportionately impacted by unemployment and earnings loss. So in the first 3 months of coronavirus alone, over 40 million individuals filed for unemployment. Workers with a high school education or less and workers with some college education are experiencing unemployment at higher rates than those with an associate's degree or higher. Further, we see Black and Latinx workers with a high school education or less and some college education having higher unemployment rate than their white peers. Even though all races have a high school education or less or some college education, we see disparities even within those groups. And we're also finding that 32 to 40% of job loss may be permanent. Looking at post-secondary specific lens, in the last recession, as I mentioned, 50% of displaced workers switched industries when re-entering the workforce. The nature of work is changing, and we can anticipate some of what workers are going to experience in unemployment and use post-secondary institutions to reskill and upskill. 86% of adult learners who complete a CTE program are employed within 6 months. Post-secondary CTE programs are unique in that they're often flexible, realizing what adult learners need to be able to succeed and complete these short-term programs with meaningful credentials that can lead to a full career pathway and a family-sustaining wage. Taking a look at post-secondary CTE students, among high school graduates who enter the workforce directly, CTE learners are more likely to be employed and have benefits than their peers who did not complete a CTE pathway. Participating in a CTE-related cooperative education, internship, apprenticeship, or mentoring program in high school is associated with higher job quality defined by wages, benefits, work hours, and job satisfaction. And if we're looking at how we want to target this why to employers, nearly 60% of companies report difficulty filling job openings because of lack of qualified applicants. We know CTE can fill this need because our programs are developed in partnership and with input from business leaders. Those who enter the workforce with a CTE background have the knowledge and skills that employers most need, and we can anticipate these learners being crucial to economic recovery, filling essential jobs during the pandemic and during economic recovery. Considering the damage we've already seen because of the pandemic and the solutions CTE provides, Advance CTE has developed a number of case-making assets. So I'm going to now take you through some of the assets that I referenced earlier, and hopefully you'll see how you can use these in the way that makes the most sense for you. And like I said, the key audience that these were designed for are the media, policymakers, and stakeholders at large. And while communicating with these audience, we want to ensure messages are consistent, which is the driving purpose of these assets. So you'll see they all have the same common threads. I want to start by sharing a short video. It's only about 2 minutes, and it highlights the major talking points that we're putting out there to help make the case for CTE as part of economic recovery. The video can be shared on your website, over social media, newsletters, slide decks, really whatever fits your particular communications format. So now enjoy the video.
The world is changing rapidly. This is especially true for our nation's labor market and economy. More people are out of work than we've seen in some time, and our communities of color have been hit especially hard as unemployment has soared. It's hard to imagine that in today's world, one event could do this much to shake us.
Oh, okay, well, it looks like the video paused a little bit early. I will put the link into the chat once I'm done sharing my slides, and you all can watch it. And I guess you got a nice little preview, and you can watch it at your own leisure. But just to kind of go over what it shares, it hits on the big points and statistics that I've been mentioning over the past few minutes of the role that CTE has in economic recovery, why it's important for secondary and post-secondary learners, how it benefits employers, and how you can advocate for CTE to be included in the national federal conversation about economic response and recovery. So I just want to quickly share out some more of the resources you can find. And the next slide has the full link. It's careertech.org/advocate, where you can find all of these packaged really nicely. We have 2 fact sheets, one specifically on making the case for secondary CTE and one specifically on making the case for post-secondary CTE. Those share out some of the talking points that I mentioned when I was going through the why for each of those groups. We have a full promotional toolkit. This provides recommended language to share these out in newsletters, recommended social media posts, a blog post you can use, as well as graphics, including those charts that were on the previous slides. And like I said, all of these can be found at careertech.org/advocate. And I'll share that link in the chat as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. My email's up here, mhills@careertech.org. I also encourage you to follow us on Twitter at CTE Works. Our communications team and myself put out real-time updates of what's happening in federal policy on our Twitter account. We also share out opportunities to engage in advocacy. ACTE does a lot of action alerts that are really great, and we share those out as well. And then finally, that link below is to our webinars page. We have many webinars coming up about different specific topics within delivering and strategizing CTE during COVID-19. And the link right above that is for our legislative update, where you can keep up to date with the next steps of everything I talked about. So thank you, Allison, for letting me share all of this. And I think we have some time maybe for Q&A now.
Thank you so much, Meredith. That was a ton of really great information. And I think most of the questions that have come in so far are like, can we get copies of the slides? So I don't know how you feel about that. I put it in the chat. I wanted to let everyone know that the recording of this will be on our YouTube playlist. And Meredith might be comfortable sharing the slides. And if not the slides, definitely a link of resources that we can send out via our listserv at CDE. So make sure you're on that listserv. So we do have one question that is from Derek, and it says, how can we work with students' parents on reskilling programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the biggest ways that we can work with students' parents is understanding what CTE is and the benefits. I think overall, we found that that's one of the biggest challenge in engaging students, especially engaging parents for students, mostly at the secondary level, is understanding really the benefits of the CTE program and what all goes into it. Again, I'm going to refer to the resources that our communications team put together. I think they just did a really nice job of, especially in the secondary fact sheet, and I'll link to this in the chat, explaining what a secondary CTE student does. You are getting these academic skills that your peers are getting, plus the work-based learning hands-on experience that really prepare you to take on the skills that your regional, state, local labor market needs.
Thank you so much. And I don't see any other questions, so I think we're ready to move on. Follow up. Okay, one popped right in. So this will be our last question, just so we can keep on schedule here, and we're doing pretty well. So follow up from Derek. How should we market and brand our CTE internship programs to employers so they buy into the possibility of rebuilding their workforce? And he's been thinking about this for a while, and I actually think that's a great question, because, as a classroom teacher, I really struggled with getting employers to actually consider high school aged interns, and yet it is something that we see as a requirement. So from the national perspective, do you have any insight on what that selling point is? I think is really what this question is talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that we've been thinking about and working on for a while. I think the first thing is approach employers. Don't expect that they're going to seek out you, even though the work that you're doing really is to benefit them. I think sharing really, specific point blank information, and we have some of these on our website and different fact sheets as well, of the higher retention rate that businesses have of their employees when they've come from this type of pipeline, where they're prepared for this, for that work environment. And I think when employers start to see the benefits and see the potential and see that other employers are using these apprenticeships and internships, and that it means that they have employees who stay with them for years and they don't have to go through all the costs of hiring and onboarding and training, that tends to be a big selling point. I think explaining right at the get-go the benefits and flexibility that these students do have to spend time as an apprentice or being trained or mentored by employers. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about, well, students wouldn't be able to, be with us anytime Monday through Friday because of their school schedule. Well, schedules have a lot of different openings and free periods, so you can do these kinds of opportunities. Or if I have a high school student, they're not able to do X, Y, and Z because they might be under 18. And there's a lot of different logistics that I think are roadblocks for employers. And as much as you can seek them out, handhold a little bit, and demonstrate those benefits, I think will be helpful.
Thank you so much, Meredith. We really appreciate your insight. This was a ton of great information, like I mentioned. And so I'm pleased to introduce our next guest, Stephen DeWitt, who is the Deputy Executive Director at the Association for Career Technical Education. And he's here to present some of the work that ACTE has done to create resources for the field, an abundance of resources, I might add, for the field. So without further ado, I'm going to give you a spotlight here, Steve. Give me one sec. There we go. I'm proud to introduce Mr. Steve DeWitt.
Great, thanks, Allison. And hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I am in Washington, D.C., in my home. Our office is actually in Alexandria, Virginia, about 10 miles away. And we've all been working from home since the beginning of the COVID crisis. So I want to thank Allison for the invitation. And also, one of our very good partners is Advance CTE. So we're pleased to be on. I'm pleased to be on with Meredith today as well. I did want to give you just a little bit of background. And let me just check with Allison. Can you see my PowerPoint slides?
We sure can.
You can. I'm just trying to figure out how to switch it. There it goes. So the first thing I wanted to mention is our mission and our vision. And you can see here that we are very focused on supporting educators primarily at the local level. We do have some state members and other members, but our focus is really about developing that competitive workforce and supporting the administrators, the teachers, the career counselors, everyone who's involved in that process. We've been also around for about 90 years. We're a 501c3 organization, so we are very careful about how we advocate. We cannot endorse candidates, for example. We have a strategic plan that's been in place since 2017. And I don't know about many of you, but given the challenges of COVID, our board of directors recently decided that we need to keep that strategic plan a bit longer. One of the things we'll be focusing on, and you can see the themes around the wheel there, is innovation. And similar to Meredith, I would love any innovative ideas or actually practices that are happening in your districts. We'd love to highlight some of the best of those innovations as we move forward this year. I also want to highlight on the right side of this page, we have 4 content priorities that we focus on, that we've been focusing on over the last few years. And some of these will change a bit, but I wanted to note the business and education connections. That topic came up in one of the questions, and we have a a coalition for workforce development through CTE. We've been working with about 50 trade associations. And so many of those businesses you talked about how to get to them, they're actually coming through our doors asking, how do we get the workforce from your courses, because that's who they need. And I know that many of you in secondary and post-secondary especially are having those conversations as well. But we're trying to identify how we can better connect the educators and the employers in these issues. I'll also talk about a few of these others as we move forward. Our membership is based on divisions, or a member would choose to join the association. And these are the divisions we currently have. They do evolve over time. We have a current focus on work-based learning and a consultant who's working with us, and I expect we will soon have a division there. These, as you can tell, are not aligned necessarily with career clusters, but they are aligned many times with organizations, sector-specific organizations. For instance, the Family and Consumer Sciences Education Division, we're linked to a number of their sector or their organizations, national organizations as well. And each of these divisions sit on our board of directors, including some regional representation. And then finally, Meredith did a terrific job on the presentation with policy, but I just wanted to mention we also have a policy and advocacy focus, and we work very collaboratively with Advance CTE, and Dr. Alicia Heislip is our lead there. She does terrific work. If you were to type in your search engines, ACTE space advocacy, you could find much more information on that. I also meant to put our web address in the chat box, and I don't think I did that, but it's acteonline.org, and I'll be referencing many materials and resources that you can find there, most of which I will mention today are going to be free resources. So let me take a breath, and I want you to think back to where you were at the end of February. And this is a photograph of where I was. I was very fortunate to be working one of our events in Fort Lauderdale. And this was the Saturday morning before I went back to Washington. And, it was just so peaceful and serene and so opposite of what we have now. But the reason I'm showing these palm trees is it's an analogy. I was reading about, I grew up in Florida myself. And so like you and many of you in California, we had a lot of palm trees. And I was reading that the sable palm trees are able to bend to, I think, 145 miles per hour hurricane winds. And to me, that is what many teachers have been doing. If you think about it, everything we've thrown your way, including administrators and everyone else in the career tech program or the school. So I just want to thank you for all that you're taking on. I know it's a tremendously stressful time, and we want to be a support to you at both ACTE and Advance CTE. So I did think about a few themes that I have encountered, or I guess formed in my mind based on the COVID crisis. The first one is on that topic, and I think that educators are really undervalued and taken for granted. And I want to talk about some of the resources that ACTE has, hopefully to address these issues. The first is that photograph I showed you was in Fort Lauderdale, and it was our Teach CTE Summit, where we brought together about 100 individuals, practitioners from around the country, to talk about the teacher recruitment and retention crisis facing our sector or our profession. We had some terrific recommendations from that, and I am going to be, we're going to be doing further work. I'm the lead on that work at ACTE. It got put on the back burner because of COVID, but we're about to relaunch, and I need to reach out to Advance CTE. They're one of the partners we want to work with, and we're going to be developing a working group around this to take some of those recommendations forward. The other thing I wanted to mention is self-care. We have certainly talked a lot about it within my organization. We know that teachers are beginning to leave the profession because of the stress under the current COVID crisis. I was just talking to one of our former board members in Iowa, and she referenced 2 people in her community who were leaving, one at the end of the year and another who was leaving I think next week, very soon, just because of the stress of what she's encountering. So we're gonna be doing more. We had a self-care week back in the summer in August, but we're gonna be doing more on that topic as we move forward. And lastly, on the right side of the screen, I think it's on the right side of your screen, is a graphic about Teach CTE, Pride in Your Profession, or our profession. We're going to be focusing on some type of toolkit and marketing for members and others to really be taking forward as we're working to address this crisis. I say crisis, it's not a crisis in every community yet, and I want to be careful about that, but it is certainly a crisis if you're an administrator with a classroom with an unfilled teaching position that you cannot fill. So we want to make sure we are doing more on that topic. The second theme I reference is innovation springs from crisis. And I think many of us in the profession have talked about the innovation that we've seen. We're trying to leverage that innovation. I would like to thank the California Department of Education, their Career and College Transitions Office. We are partnering with them on the newsletter on the far right. And I know that many of you in California have received that newsletter and access it. We've been very pleased to share what we're doing and to learn, and our members are learning as much as anyone from what you're doing in California as well. So thank you for that partnership. We've also valued the partnership with the San Diego Office of Education and the CTE Online, and just look forward to continuing to work on that and sharing lesson plans and other resources. The middle document is something we did at ACTE right after the COVID crisis broke. And it is a virtual conference planning guide. I think it's free to everyone on our website. And I included the links at the top. I'll be sure to share this presentation. But this resource really, after we were, I guess, forced to run our first virtual conference, and we've now done 5 or 10 of those, we were happy to share what we had learned along the way. And so it has some good advice and recommendations. Even if you're thinking about one in your school or local community, you might use that guide. And then last but certainly not least, we have a high quality CTE planning for a COVID-19 impacted school year guide. I don't know if many of you saw that in the CTE distance newsletter that I referenced earlier, but we've linked to it in there. We have built the guide around our CTE program of study framework, which is an evidence-based framework that we developed at ACTE to identify what all CTE programs need to have in order to be high quality. And we do have other resources on our website that I hope you'll access. One of those is an evaluation to help programs think about which 2 or 3 of the 12 elements we have in there, and actually we have 13 elements now, we added a new one since COVID, but which of those elements do I need help with? We've got issues such as access and equity, business and community partnerships, which was listed earlier, engaging instruction, work-based learning, all the components that we believe an effective program needs. And we've pilot tested this in the field with our members as well. One last resource I wanted to mention is the Skills to Succeed Academy. We've partnered with Accenture on this free academy that provides online resources. I think an excellent use of this resource is to prepare your students who are moving into the workforce or work-based learning. They do a terrific module on interviewing, for instance. So we urge you to take a look at the modules that are there in the 3 courses. We actually have a $1,000 stipend for the first, I think it was first 20 programs that meet getting 500 students to take at least and complete at least 500 of, one of those modules. So if you have 500 students in your program who complete at least one of the modules, we will send you a check for $1,000. Now you have to register for that, and you can find that on our website or speak to me, link to me, and I'll be happy to share more information. Quite frankly, we've had the money for a while. We're trying to give away that. So there's lots of money to be found there. The next COVID theme is inequities have been illuminated. And I think we've all been familiar with this. If we think about those students who do not have access to technology or broadband, but also students who are perhaps forced to work to earn money for their family because no one else in the family is able to do that currently, taking them away from their own education. We know this issue has been not only in CTE, but in education for a long time. ACTE has our equity statement. Actually, we reference inclusion, access, equity, and diversity because we think each of those words means a bit of a different thing. And we have our statement on our website, but we're also moving to action. We have an advisory group that any of our members can join, and many of them have, to advise on what we should be doing. We have an IAED webpage where we're posting resources around this topic. And we have a new Inclusion, Access, Equity, and Diversity column in our Techniques magazine, which is the magazine that goes to all of our members that we initiated this year. And then I wanted to reference our new mentorship program. We are now beginning a mentorship program where mentors will be supporting their mentees around these issues. If you are an individual who's interested in the mentorship, if you want to become a mentor, that deadline is open until November 1st. You do have to be an ACTE member, but we'd love any of you to think about that. Or if you want to be a mentee, the window has closed for the mentees this year, but we'll be doing this in consecutive years. So we look forward to using this as a way to increase people's understanding and compassion around this topic. And then one more theme I had was nothing lasts forever. So don't forget your long-term goals, your long-term professional development. I wanted to mention a few things here. We do have a CTE Learn online learning network, and that network houses about 150 courses, which are pay courses where you could get CEU credit, but we also have free courses on that website. We have an ongoing series of online webinars. Two that we'll be featuring this month are on the IAED topic. One of them will focus on a panel of CTSO, Career Technical Student Organization students, who will be interviewed by Dr. Roger Cleveland, who is an excellent individual from Kentucky who's been an expert in diversity for years. And so we're really looking forward to hearing from those students about how this topic is affecting them. And we have an ongoing series in addition to our virtual CTE discussions, which are similar to webinars and are led by our volunteer educators in action. I just wanted for a moment to show you where the CTE Learn free courses are. You can see that free courses, view free resources button in the middle of this page. You can also see free resources at the top of the page, and ctelearn.org is the website address. We have a number of other resources in there, so please take a look at that. We've been partnering with a number of states over the course of COVID. I think we had something like 9,000 new users in the last few months, so we're really seeing a lot of traction here. And we did make some of these courses free when the COVID crisis first broke. We wanted to make sure people had access to courses that would help them with online instruction. Just a few other things I wanted to mention that didn't fit neatly into my themes. We have a number of leadership opportunities and programs at ACTE. The most recent is one sponsored by the ECMC Foundation, which is our post-secondary leadership program, post-secondary leadership success program at ACTE. You can find more information there at the web address below. And it's been a really terrific way to connect with our post-secondary leaders and to build up the leaders within CTE in that community. We also have a number of secondary focused leadership programs or secondary and post-secondary. One of the reasons we do this is for our own leadership within ACTE, but another critical important aspect is that we are seeing a lot of individuals coming to career and technical education from outside of CTE. And that's not bad in and of itself, but many of them do not have the knowledge and the background that some of our more seasoned professionals do. And so we want to make sure that they get that type of education and support. I also wanted to mention the CTE Research Network. which is funded by the Institute of Education Sciences. And it's also in partnership with the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education at the U.S. Department of Education. We are one of the 4 primary partners in this network, but there are many other partners involved. And the focus is really to have more causal research studies that support or identify what the benefits and the best ways of quality CTE education are in practice. And so some of that initial research, some of those initial causal studies will be coming out soon. The study, or the research network rather, has been running for about a year or 2. And so we're to that point where we should have some initial findings. And we hope that you'll be looking to our website and the research network website for that information. And I also wanted to mention that we're a proud supporter of the Horatio Alger National Career and Technical Scholarship Program. This program goes directly to CTE students who are going on to post-secondary education, and it funds their education for anything less than a 2-year degree. So it's really an underutilized resource. There are, I think, about 510 scholarships were given last year. You can see there it's $2,500 a piece, but a lot of these have gone untapped. So please keep these scholarships in mind. I realize now that the website address for Horatio Alger is not on here, but I can get that information to you, and we can certainly give you more information on that program. I also wanted to end with the promotion of our own virtual vision event. Each year, our virtual vision, our Career Tech Vision, brings about 5,000 members and others to a city around the US. We were in Anaheim 2 years ago, and we were supposed to be in beautiful Nashville, Tennessee this year, but like many others, we are going virtual with this event. We have many different breakout concurrent sessions. We'll have 300 plus. We're excuse me, working to make it very engaging, and we'd love to have as many of you as possible. I wanted to mention that the advanced registration is available up until October 23rd, so that deadline is coming. And please go to careertechvision.org, and you can see what we have planned for that event. We'd love to have you. So in closing, I'm providing my email address and my phone number. That's my cell, my direct cell number, since we've moved virtually. Would love to hear from you during the course of the next few months about what your needs are. We know that the COVID crisis or situation has made some changes that will stay for a long time, maybe forever. We actually think some of those changes are good, but we want to hear from you about what your needs are and what supports you need as we move forward. So I'll stop there, and also happy to take questions if Allison would like that. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And I'm trying to get myself here so I can be seen. Give me 1 second here. All right, thank you so much, Stephen. We do have some questions, and so I'm going to go ahead and take one out of the chat, which came up a little earlier as the first question. And we have Meredith here too. Meredith, I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you just in case Stephen wants to throw some of those questions your way. So we're all on now. Okay, great. So the first question, oh, now I have to hunt it down. Okay. This was a great question. I think a lot of these are California teachers really wanting to know, like, is this the norm of what everybody experiences in CTE on a national level? So this question was about national standard operating procedures being developed to help us with the hands-on CTE activities in the virtual world. And Steve, I know you guys have been really working on this, so if you want to speak to that, that would be great.
Sure. No, I'd be happy to, and then maybe Meredith has more to add. The COVID guide, I realized I didn't talk about what that is, but it's about a 60-page guide that discusses in-person and remote learning. And we developed that right when the COVID crisis hit. And I think many of our teachers, even though they may be in person now, will be going remote later and vice versa. So I hope you use that. I will admit that I think the topic you mentioned in terms of hands-on learning has been one of the most challenging. While there are some courses that can be shared online, while we've got some practices that can be shared, we haven't found a perfect fit or answer to all of those questions that are coming forward. For instance, we know with assessments, many of the students who are taking their assessments for credentials, for certifications rather, were not able to do that at the end of the year, and many schools were left scrambling. We're looking to find some solutions. I probably need to check back in with Michael Conant on our staff, who's leading that effort. Meredith, I don't know if you have anything tangible more than I do right now.
I guess yes and no. I think what we've been finding so far is like this is obviously something that everybody is struggling with, and so a lot of the strategies have been implemented on a small scale. So by a district or by a particular career cluster, just because factors like industry and geography really, play such pivotal roles in what type of virtual hands-on learning or in-person hands-on learning can be done. So we're kind of seeing a wide array of strategies and not a ton that's been able to be scaled across an entire state. Two things I guess that I'll just say quickly. One, when possible, when the resources exist, we're seeing instructors deliver kits to students that they can use to then replicate or duplicate the specific technical task from whatever remote location they are learning from. We're also seeing augmented reality used in all types of new ways. So there was a pilot for augmented reality to be used with architecture, which was a little bit new. But of course, even within that technology, there's limits when you look at welding or health services. So unfortunately, like Steve, I don't have an answer, and I think we're just really trying to take in what strategies are being used, what's been working, and how that can be spread.
And I actually just want to piggyback on that. We have a submission form that goes out in our monthly newsletter that's asking for the field to share things that are working, because we're all in this together. And I feel like there's a lot of really great kind of, as Meredith stated, like single teachers that have found something that works really great for them. So please share that out, because we know a lot of the simulation software is very expensive, and it's out there, but it's costly, and people didn't have the budgets that allowed them to purchase that in advance. And so this is an ongoing question. And I'm going to plow through. We're going to probably go a little 5 minutes over. If you all need to hop off, you can email me for the certificate. That's no problem. But I want to address some of these other questions since we started about 5 minutes in. So one of these questions is actually pretty interesting to me as well. I came from a district that our CTE teachers were in California. Our CTE teachers were actually paid higher than classroom teachers and were part of our union. But many districts in California have CTE teachers on an hourly schedule, and they are on special contracts, and they're never part of the unions. And so I think the question is really about, is that common around the nation? And is there any work to be done we understand there's local control and there's bargaining issues, but is there any national work that's trying to bring CTE into the same kind of recognition and pay as classroom teachers?
Well, so my quick answer is yes, because the Teach CTE focus, the recruitment and retention issues, I think salary is definitely part of that discussion. It won't be the only issue we focus on, but that's part of it. I'm not aware, I'll just be honest, and I don't know if that's common around the country or not. I have not heard of that issue before, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because usually if it exists one place, it exists somewhere else too. Meredith, anything you have on that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a common challenge we're seeing, in every state. I can confidently say this challenge of teacher retention, but especially teacher recruitment. And like Steve said, salary is one of the biggest barriers, because, why do I want to leave my industry job where I make X amount to go to a teaching job where I make significantly less? So just kind of thinking like generally some strategies we've been seeing, and a lot of this depends on, state rules and union rules and all of that. But any type of kind of supplementary certification for bringing in industry experts to teach. So whether it's that they can teach at an adjunct level, so trying to maintain being an instructor and also being in the industry, or we're seeing different types of expedited or alternative certifications to teach. Of course, to teach, you need to know how to be in the classroom and teach. That's really important. And so that training is important, but also coming in with the experience and the workplace skills that you have should be validated as well. So different types of like alternative training and certification is something we've been seeing pop up in conversations.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's an ongoing challenge that and it might be a California specific thing, and it came out of our OOP model, our regional occupational program model. And so now that a lot of those programs have merged with districts, we're seeing some discrepancies in pay, and it's presented a lot of challenges. So thank you for addressing that. So I think we'll take one more question, and then there's lots of questions that people want your slides. So we're just gonna make a point to correspond. I should be able to pull the registrant list and be able to send it out that way. Otherwise, we will be sending our monthly newsletter out in October. And so that I can send it out via that way too. And you can also reach out to Steve and Meredith directly. They provided their information. So Steve, there's a real quick Accenture question. So if they're in really small rural districts or schools, is it still possible for them to participate?
So there might be a way, we probably have to discuss it with you. Perhaps the district could participate. And the reason I say that is we're in a partnership with Accenture, and I just have to talk to them about permission on that. But we'd be happy to explore it.
Thank you. And then
Allison, I'm sorry, just quickly on your last question that you asked. I just wanted to point out that I used to be the lobbyist for ACTE, and I don't do that anymore. But 9 times out of 10, when we get a question like that, it really raises our attention. And what a question from one individual like that sometimes helps us to identify it's an issue around the country. So I love questions like that. It really brings things to our attention that we don't always know about because we're just 2 organizations with a few people. Just wanted to.
Thank you for that. And I actually am in dialogue with Steve and Meredith. And so these are things that, we can talk more about. So thank you for presenting that. And the last question is about virtual internships. So the California Department of Education has just added an internship metric to the college and career indicators, which is a dashboard, a data collection dashboard that is for school accountability. And so the challenge right now is with virtual work-based learning and virtual internships and what those opportunities could look like. And so the question really is, are there PR pieces to help with that notion as a selling point, I think, to employers? So have you seen if you've seen, and for time's sake, I think we should probably maybe make this a longer conversation because this is something we can actually address as a spotlight in our newsletter. But maybe we start looking at examples of virtual work-based learning, what that looks like in other states, and kind of present that as a spotlight like we did on assessments last month, right? Mm-hmm. Unless you guys have anything that you want to share out really quick as a last thought on that.
No, that's a really great point. And it's, we don't have comms pieces that we've developed specifically for that yet, but I know that it's going to be, coming on the horizon. So definitely, I think this is a great conversation to continue. And I think if Allison and I'm sure we'll be in touch sharing anything that comes up so we can keep building on this.
And I would just add, Kelly Deemer, who's our consultant, who used to work for the Iowa Department of Education on work-based learning. She's now working to collect materials from around the country for us, and she may very well have something on that. So I'd love to connect her into that conversation as well.
Yeah, and Sarah just asked, is there going to be any information or diagram on how this is a very state specific question, on how the CCI is going to reflect internship stuff? I actually don't have the answer for that, but I can look into that and find out what the next steps are. This is a very brand new thing that I'm not even sure many people know about. So with that, I really appreciate everybody's participation and attendance. That was incredible. Lots of really important, great information. I also want to note that everything can be found on their websites. So although the ACTE website is like a vortex of greatness, it's hard to find. So if you can't find something, reach out to us. But there's so much good stuff on there, so you just have to like hunt for it. And I'm gonna put up our final slide. Steve, did you want to add something? Did you like that
No, I was
analogy?
just gonna say, when I look for things on our website, I use the search engine. I use Google.
That's what I do too. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Ignore the mess of my desktop as I pull this up. I don't know, actually, I could probably just share this. And there you go. Congratulations. If you need to verify your participation, here it is. And we appreciate everybody being here today. Just take a screenshot of this. And I keep cutting people off before they can take their screenshots. So we'll just hold it up here for a second and we'll go ahead and turn our cameras off and end the workshop when we start seeing people leave. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.